Okay, so the first one obviously is, why do we care about gut health? So should I eat to improve my gut health? And of course we should be eating to improve your gut health. I think that there's a lot more research coming out now that is showing that gut health is more important than we ever thought. So the gut microbiome is a whole lot of bacteria, of thousands and thousands of different bacteria in the small intestine and down to the colon. And obviously, the more diverse and the more you've got in each of those bacteria, some are better than others and some are worse. So it's about the diversity and the amount that you have in that bacteria in the gut microbiome that's going to help. So if you do have dysbiosis, which is where the gut microbiome isn't balanced, that means that there isn't enough of one gut bacteria and there's a lot less of the other. So that's where the gut isn't happy. There isn't a clear way at the moment that we can test what your gut microbiome is. There is a little bit of evidence coming out about gut fecal transplants and testing from the gut, but the problem is by the time they get the biopsy of the small intestine out, it potentially some of the bacteria has died. So it is very hard to test what is going on in your gut at the moment. I think that's going to be a world of evidence coming out, a lot of discussion, and I think that's going to be a coming area. So obviously that's your gut microbiome. When your gut microbiome is not diverse and hasn't got lots of the different bacteria in it, that's where there is links of it being linked to insulin resistance, obesity, poor mental health, anxiety, depression, and that is purely from the gut-brain axis. So that is where the nerve from the small intestine to the brain, it has a two-way communication. So if your brain's not happy, then your gut's not going to be happy. Or if your gut's not happy, your brain's not going to be happy. So that is definitely two ways. So obviously, one of my things is, yes, we should be trying to improve your gut health because it's going to help in so many other areas. Okay, so one of the major things that I do for monitoring is actually your stool consistency. I know that sounds quite strange, but I have to admit, in my room, we talk a lot about stool or poo. So that's a good way of being able to measure what's going on in your gut and how happy it is. So if we have a look at the Bristol stool chart, which is what we would use to monitor what's going on with your stools, number one would be constipation, where you're getting the separated hard lumps, like nuts, or pellets is another way, like kangaroos. Or you can go all the way down to 7, which is watery diarrhea. So there's no liquid, there's no solids within it. So basically what we're aiming for is about a 4. So a sausage or a snake, smooth and soft with its skin on, and no need for straining, I suppose is one of the other bigger things. So this is where we would start to work out whether there is something wrong, whether we need to making sure that we are improving or changing your diet accordingly. So improving your gut health. So this is if there is a set, like you're constantly a 4 on the Bristol stool chart. Then the only things I would be looking at doing are changing your pre and probiotics. So making sure that you're getting both. So prebiotics are the fiber molecules that are going to feed the probiotics to diversify the gut microbiome. So this is where we're trying to increase the diversity of your gut microbiome. So your probiotics are things like your kefir, anything that's fermentable. So your kombucha, actually sourdough is a probiotic because it is fermented in the process. The kimchi, sauerkraut, all of those are all your probiotics, and even pot set yogurt. So you don't have to go and buy a probiotic tablet. You can eat foods that are high in probiotics. Then your prebiotics are your fiber molecules that are feeding your probiotics to grow and diversify. So this is where we're talking about grainy breads. This is where we're talking about fruits and vegetables, legumes, beans and pulses. Things like that have got a lot of fiber in them are going to be feeding your probiotics. The next thing I would be talking about is increasing the fiber content in the food. So let's increase your fiber content overall, and that would be making sure that we're eating lots of fruits and vegetables to increase your fiber content and hopefully make it your stool consistency about a 4. So this is where I would be looking at making sure that we're getting 30 grams of fiber per day, every day, and a lot of Australians don't get that. So making sure that we can try and aim to getting those. Ways and means of increasing fiber. There is fiber supplements that you can use, or psyllium husk, that are based on that. If we're trying to work out whether fiber is going to help quite rapidly, then I probably would be adding a fiber supplement in, or we consistently struggle with stools, then we probably would add a supplement in. So I like to use fiber to firm up the stool. So that would be if you're having constant diarrhea, I like to add fiber in to see whether that's going to form the stool. So the soluble fiber is going to form the stool. Then I also like to help with constipation, just to see whether we can keep you going every day. So lower stress levels. This is where we're talking about the gut-brain axis. So this is where I would suggest maybe seeing a mindset coach, or talking to your GP, or seeing a psychologist about trying to reduce the stress overall. So that would be a way of making sure that we're getting the happy brain to the happy gut. And then also, if we're increasing the fiber consumption in your food or in your intake overall, we've got to make sure that you're drinking enough liquid. So you got to aim for the 2 litres per day at least, because as we increase your fiber, we can cause gut symptoms if you aren't increasing your hydration, because what will happen is the stool will get to the colon, the water will be absorbed out of the stool, and therefore we're left with a real quite hard stool because the water's been sucked out. So we've got to make sure that we're getting enough water so we don't suck out too much water. So that's just improving your gut health overall. If there is something wrong, so like an intolerance or IBS, this is where we would go on further. So I would get you to basically do a food symptom diary. So you would record your food intake at the top. So breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, what time you had them, how bad the symptom was, and the amount of the food that you had. So this is in particular looking at intolerances. So at the bottom, we would be writing what the symptom that you had would be. So that could go from abdo pain, it could be a diarrhea, it could be flatulence, and quite offending flatulence I'm looking for in particular. So that's what you would be recording at the bottom of the page. So that would make me see that I can see what time you had the food and then what time you had the symptom. The things that you look for within this. So if I was having a food symptom diary, I would be looking at making sure that we're aiming for that 30 grams of fiber per day. If we go above that, so if we start to get about 40 grams of fiber per day, that's where you're going to start to have some GI symptoms. So we've got to find that sweet spot between 25 and 30 grams per day. So there's other things that we would be looking for would be patterns. So if you happen to have diarrhea, or you happen to have abdo pain or flatulence after eating this particular food, then we will be working backwards and working retrospectively. So that's where I would be looking at that. Now, there is something called FODMAPs. So these are fermentable oleo, di, and monosaccharides and polyoleo. So these are fermentable carbohydrate chains that get into the small intestine and can swell. So this is what generally, if I'm going to prescribe an elimination diet for a gut symptom, I would do FODMAPs first. So it gets into the small intestine and swells because it draws all the water to the stool. Therefore, you can get air pockets, which is going to cause the flatulence. Also, the swelling can cause the bloating as well as abdo pain. I do want to say, if you're going to do the FODMAP diet, please make sure you're doing it under the supervision of someone. So it could be the gastroenterologist, it could be the GP, or it could be a dietitian. I will go more into what FODMAPs looks like. Then there's the food chemical diet. So this is done by RPA, and it is called the food chemical diet. It's looking at eliminating things like salicylates, amines, and glutamates. And these are particular food chemicals that are naturally found in foods. And it would be seeing if you're having any reactions to those. This one is more restrictive than the FODMAP diet. So we please make sure that we are looking at whether we need to be doing this one, because that one is very restrictive and it's not always the healthiest choices. It would be cutting out a lot of your fibre and a lot of your fresh fruit and veg to be able to work out whether the food chemicals are causing a reaction. So increasing fibre content within your foods. As I said before, it would be a lot of it increasing your fruits and vegetables into your meals, increasing your whole grains. So switching to a whole grain bread or a whole grain cereal or brown rice. So that would be increasing your fibre. Then snacking on whole grain crackers, nuts and seeds, and fruit as a snack. Making sure that you keep the skins of fruits and vegetables on, even when you're cooking, it can be useful because that's a different type of fibre. Then including oats and chia seeds, and I've got some recipes that have got chia seeds in them as well as oats. So you'll get them afterwards. And then I've also got some recipes that have got some beans and legumes in your diet. So seeing whether you can increase those. And then at the end, I do have the caveat of trialling a fibre supplement. So whether it's Metamucil or ProNourish or Benefiber or Psyllium Husk. So Psyllium Husk is the basic one. And then the other three would be something that you could buy from the supermarket. And then just follow the label on the back to see whether they would suit you. So FODMAPs, as I said before, there is sugar or carbohydrate that is not completely digested or malabsorbed in the small intestine. So they swell and produce gas, causing pain and discomfort. So oligosaccharides are fructans, and they're found in things like wheat, rye, onions, garlic, and legumes pulses. So this is where you would be taking out those, as well as lactose, as well as honey, apples, high fructose corn syrup, and stone fruits in the oleo. So the idea of the FODMAP diet is that you eliminate fully for 2 weeks and then you gradually start to include them back in. If you don't find that the symptoms have improved within a couple of days of the elimination phase, then I probably would suggest stopping and going back to your GP or gastroenterologist and seeing whether it's working. Because it is quite restrictive, and especially as we've hit Freedom Day, it means that you might be a bit more restricted when you're eating out, because garlic and onion, when you're eating out, is really hard to not have. So the elimination diet. So this is done by RPA. So the symptoms that I would be looking at for this one would be hives and headaches and bowel changes. So this means that we are restricting some vitamins and minerals, so you don't keep on it forever. So salicylates are found in fruits and vegetables, nuts, honey, and yeast extracts. Amines I see is always the things that grow better with age. So these would be your cheese, chocolate, wine, and yeast extracts. Glutamates would be your tomato, cheese, mushroom, stock cubes, MSG, and some sauces. Now, I just want to say again, I don't do this one very often because it is very restrictive. This one is normally I would refer on to the RPA clinic itself just to see whether this one helps. But if you are getting some symptoms that you seem to be clustering, like hives, headaches, and bowel changes, then potentially see whether you can get into the RPA GI symptom clinic with the dietitians. So if there's a particular symptom or meal that is causing symptoms afterwards, then let's see whether there is. So for example, if a patient was having a coffee at 10 a.m., which is actually, this is actually a true example, they were having a coffee at 10 a.m. and they were having the gut symptoms daily at 11 and 12, we changed the coffee and then therefore the symptom went away. So they were getting abdo pain, flatulence, and gut disturbances. Now remember, with gut disturbances, that anything with caffeine is a gut irritant, so it can cause the reaction, as well as alcohol, spicy foods, and fatty foods. So if you happen to be getting any of these symptoms afterwards, that's where I would be eliminating that food or changing that food to a different choice, and then we'd be seeing whether the symptom would go away. And then stress. So a lot of my patients, I would get them to record if they were feeling particularly stressed or anxious. So I'm sure today at the start of the talk, I would have done a little star next to my box if I had a meal. And then that way you can see whether the stress or anxiety is getting you to go to the toilet. So that's how you would be working backwards to have a look at that. Oh, and that's all my slides. I'm really sorry I talked so quickly. So I'm more than happy to start answering questions now, if that's all right. Oh. Oh. So I suppose a lot of questions I get would be whether I should be taking a probiotic just to supplement. If you happen to be having any symptoms, then probiotics I generally would see whether it is encouraging you to have less symptoms. So it's worth a trial, or if your GP or gastroenterologist suggest. And it looks like we're all ready to start the questions, so that's a general one that I have.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Sorry to leave you hanging there as I was trying to come back on stage and work the technology, but thank you. That was such a wonderful and interesting insight into what you do and the way that people can help kind of track and manage and learn more about this stuff. So yes, we'd love to have some questions. I can see there's lots of people in the audience. So if you have any questions that have come up for you, please feel free to pop them in the chat box. I can see a couple of them have come through. Very quickly to answer the first one, yes, there'll be a recording from today's event, and that will be coming out in an email tomorrow. So keep your eye out for that. Also, Sarah has really kindly given us 4 delicious gut-friendly recipes. And we'll be popping those in the chat box shortly as a handout. I think it's just appeared there. So you can download those. And thank you so much, Sarah, for that very generous sharing from your end.
That's right. They're just recipes that are high in fibre. So that's why.
High fibre.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, thank you for that. So let's start off with a couple of questions that have come through. Lots coming through now, so I'll just go to the one that we've received.
Love lots of questions.
Received first. We do. We've got lots of time, so please feel free to keep adding them. Okay, so the first question from Julie is in relation to the RPA clinic that you mentioned, and she said, "How do you get into it?" She's heard that the wait can be over a year. She says she's tried all these diets, none have worked, and she does seem to have some issues with foods from each category. So I think she's thinking she might be a good candidate for this. Yeah.
So there is some private dietitians out there that do the elimination diet, but if you refer, then they generally will keep you in. So if you pop into but you will have to get onto the wait list. I know what you mean, Julie. But Anne Swain, who's the head dietitian that runs that clinic, is absolutely lovely. So if you did want to go see a private dietitian, there are people out there that do the elimination diet, and that would be an option so that you can trial it before you pop in to see the RPA clinic.
Okay, so just get on that list, and even if it is a long wait, I guess it can start to shorten over time, and there might be some things that Julie can try in the meantime, possibly. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you, Sarah. So had a question from Tammy in regards to FODMAP.
Yeah.
She said, would you do a low FODMAP in a 15-month-old that has bloating, gas, and loose stools?
No. So I probably wouldn't do FODMAPs until the age of 12, just because, or even older than that, just because it is quite an elimination diet. So if you are having symptoms in a 15-month-old or having symptoms from kids, I probably would go and see your GP and have a discussion with them. Generally, because our gut is trying to adapt to eating different foods, you can have some intolerances and some symptoms to different foods. So gradually over time, you might find that they are having particular symptoms, and therefore I would talk to your GP about what the best course is. Majority of the time that you can see a pediatric dietitian and they can talk you through things. So you can find them, if you just Google pediatric dietitian, there is a certain qualification to deal with pediatrics as a dietitian, and you would be trying to work out what they would be intolerant to. But I wouldn't be doing an elimination diet purely from this perspective of you're starting to restrict their food, and therefore you potentially could cause them failure to thrive. You could get them to not gain weight or gain height. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. So, yeah, pediatric dietitian.
Yeah.
Excellent. Wonderful. Thank you. Jeanette asked a question around constipation. She said, would you use the same ideas, I think the tips and tools that you've spoken about, when the constipation is caused by medications, especially when the medications are life-saving? So it sounds like the medications are an important part of the picture, but can we apply the same kind of ideas for constipation there?
Yeah, so there's no reason why you couldn't start to increase your water intake, or increase your fiber intake, or increase your probiotics or prebiotics to help with the constipation. I probably would do it at the same time as seeing whether we can keep you on some sort of laxative, so that we can keep you regular and trying to improve those over time. But there's no harm in starting to improve your gut health through fiber, water, as well as stress and probiotics and prebiotics at the same time. So do it all at the same time.
Excellent. Diane asked, do you need to eat foods in combination in order to improve gut health and digestion?
Oh, good question.
Definitely.
So that's a good one. So I would probably eat the probiotics and prebiotics at the same time. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the same meal, but I would be, if you're trying to improve your probiotics, let's improve your prebiotics at the same time. So that would be increasing your fiber, so having whole grains and whole fruits and vegetables at the same time as having those probiotics. So the kefir, kombucha, yogurt set, pot set. So just making sure that you're improving them at the same time. That's a good question.
And how much, just on prebiotics and probiotics, how much fermented food should someone include daily to get the benefits? That came from our community earlier in the week.
That's a hard question. So we actually don't know the answer to that one. I wish I did, because it would be very prescriptive and very easy to prescribe. Generally, if you're going to start to include a probiotic, so say if you're going to start to have kombucha, or you're going to start having sourdough each day, I would be having the same thing quite regularly, because it means that you're continually feeding that gut microbiome the same probiotic. So I would just be making sure whatever you do include, you include it regularly. I know it doesn't answer the question, but that's all I've got.
Well, sometimes it's good to know that there isn't a direct answer, because people can be really worrying about these things, or trying to get it right, or asking the questions, Googling, and not getting the answer. So sometimes there's not a direct answer is a good answer, and the fact that you've said regularly is surely really helpful as well. So Mimi has said to us, I've recently been told I have inflammation in my system which exacerbates muscle soreness. Have you got any suggestions for management of this by food?
That is a hard question.
So I guess inflammation or muscle pain or joint pain and foods, looking for a bit of a connection between those possibly.
It's a hard question. So there's not necessarily one food that's going to help reduce your inflammation overall, or improve increase your inflammation. They do know that having a highly processed food diet is going to increase that inflammation. So therefore having things that are packet, so things that are made from a packet, or junk food, or highly processed food. So that would be anything that's gone through a few steps of processing. That is where those things can increase the inflammation throughout. But that's a very generalized inflammation is very generalized. So it's a very generalized suggestion. I probably would just be making sure that we're increasing your fruits and vegetables and having a lot more fiber. That would be the only things that I would suggest, but that's me grasping at straws. So, and that's just a general healthy diet. So no, I don't have anything clearly that's going to help reduce muscle soreness or anything like that. There is a little bit in magnesium that's going to help with muscle cramps. So when you're increasing your fruits and vegetables, I'd be increasing things that are high in magnesium or having a magnesium powder. I have a lot of patients that have magnesium capsules to go to bed at night to help with sleep. But that would be only for cramps. That wouldn't be for generalized soreness. So sorry, I've got not much for you.
No, I think that's pretty helpful. I love magnesium. I take supplements. I bathe in it when I can. Speaking of which, what foods specifically are high in magnesium?
Fruits and vegetables. So that's where you'd be
Just
going.
generally fruits and vegetables.
Fruits and vegetables, because it is actually in our soil. So therefore, it would be coming through from the soil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, excellent. Amber asked whether or not there are any resources to guide through food chemicals.
Oh, through the RPA diet, I'm sure if you Googled it online, you probably could find it. I have a little bit of resources, but not a lot. More than happy to send that what I've got across.
Yeah, we would really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we can share that with you, Amber, and share it. We'll probably put it in the Facebook group for anyone else that's interested in accessing that.
It is
also
very, very restrictive, Amber. I hardly put anyone on it. So be careful, because it is quite restrictive, because it means you can only eat white bread and pears as your fruit. So I'm talking quite restrictive. Let's be careful when we're doing it, Amber.
Yeah. So again, under the guidance of a practitioner, a dietitian. Yeah. Okay. So many questions coming through. Thank you, guys. Keep them coming. We might ask a couple of questions in relation to specific foods. The first one is from Jay Shree, who asks, is pot set yogurt and fat-free yogurt like Yalna equally beneficial?
So that would be from the probiotic. So that's your pot set yogurts are going to give you that probiotic that you can't get in many places. So that's what, yes, the Jalnud pot set yogurts are a source of probiotic. So generally yogurts will have it on the label whether they have probiotics, because everyone's trying to promote it. Food companies are trying to promote it. So yeah, go for the fat-free Jalnud yogurt-free. Yeah.
Okay. So it might be an obvious or silly question. So let's go with it anyway. With pot setting, what is the benefit? What's the process?
So it's because they do everything in the pot. So they put the bacteria that's going to grow the yogurt, and therefore that's what's going to give you that probiotic. Does that make sense?
And what's the alternative, that they would make it in something else, and then throughout that process you would lose some of that goodness?
Yeah. So generally I go for a pot set yogurt over not. But it depends on what I'm trying to achieve from my yogurt. So if I'm wanting to get some more protein throughout the day, then I might go for a protein yogurt. But if I'm trying to get my probiotics, then I probably would go for a pot set yogurt.
Okay. Okay, we've had another question from Mimi, who says a 9-year-old granddaughter has been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. Do you have any suggestions for foods to eat or avoid?
So there was a little bit of evidence in the beginning when it first came out that food colorings can cause an exacerbation of symptoms, so they can get more disorganized or more erratic. I've had a lot of patients tell me that's true. So subjectively, they tell me it's true. Objectively, I've got nothing to back it up. So that would be where you were trying to make sure that you're reducing your food colorings overall. I suppose as well as highly processed sugar would be one that is going to encourage those behaviors. Does that make sense? So therefore, I'd be trying to reduce your overall highly processed sugar intake at the same time as reducing your food colorings.
And that's artificial
Artificial, yeah,
colors
food colorings.
and flavors also, or just coloring?
Just colouring. The evidence only came out with colourings, but I don't know whether there's been more in that area, whether there's been more in flavours as well over
Mhm.
time.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I don't know if it's just anecdotal, but I know with my son, red food coloring and him are a really bad combination.
exactly.
I can see the change.
And I get
Yeah.
that a lot, but I've got no
Mm,
evidence to back it up. So it's really hard to say
mm.
that objectively it's going to have a difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Is there any correlation between positive sort of connection between fish oils and ADD? There's been, or sorry, ADHD. There's been a bit of talk over the years around that, potentially, the benefits of fish oils in treating that.
In treating that? Well,
Yep,
it would be in correlation to medication. So you would be
yep.
having the fish oil capsules or having fish 2 to 3 times a week, as well as making sure that you're having that medication at the same time. Yeah.
Okay. I've had the same question from two people, which is really
Ah,
interesting.
cool.
So Jay Shree and Victoria both asked whether or not poor gut health causes ulcers. Mouth ulcers, one person has asked, and the other has said just ulcers in general. So we'll go with mouth ulcers.
Yeah, sure. So mouth ulcers is actually a symptom on the elimination diet. It's not necessarily something that I would be looking for, but it is a symptom on that particular diet. But as I said before, I don't normally put people on that diet, and it's quite restrictive. So that one would be, I probably wouldn't put them on just for symptoms of mouth ulcers, but if it was correlated with other things, so if it was correlated with gut health at the same time as hives, then I probably would consider it. If we were talking about general stomach ulcers, so stomach actually happens a lot earlier in the digestive tract, so that would happen. Your stomach, your nutrients get absorbed in your small intestine. So your stomach would happen a lot earlier. So therefore, we would be looking at things that are quite acidic. So things like tomatoes, that would be trying to reduce reflux or anything with a gut ulcer, if that makes sense, a stomach ulcer. So there's 2 different ulcers that I tried to address. Hopefully that helps,
Yep,
Victoria.
yep. I think we covered both
Yeah,
bases.
cool.
Thanks, Sarah. We have a question from Lurong who asked whether gut and vaginal health are related.
This is a good question. So I get a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that with the Candida diet.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of evidence behind the Candida diet, and I can't say that the vaginal health will be backed up by gut health, but I don't want to completely rule it out for the future. So I do wonder whether in the future we're going to learn a lot more about that and work out whether we should be having a different probiotic for that particular symptom. So
Can we
not
talk?
yet, but I reckon in the future.
Can we talk a little bit about Candida and the Candida diet? So, what Candida is, and sort of how it presents in people, and what that looks like as a diet for people. Because a lot of people in our community have mentioned it over recent months, and just looking for some information on it, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I suppose I can talk about the Candida diet. I'm not probably the best person to talk about Candida itself, just because
Hmm.
I'm not a GP.
Sure.
So I can talk about as a woman so I have a lot of patients that come into me on the Candida diet because they have a lot of yeast infections. And
Right.
that would be tied back to things like yeast infections would be vaginal health. So that would be making sure that you talk to your GP about that, because I'm not the best person. But the Candida diet is taking a lot of the highly processed sugars out of your diet. Now, I've found over the years, according to what website you look at, it's more and more restrictive, because it does dip in a little bit to the FODMAP diet at the moment, on what is included in the Candida diet. I don't prescribe the Candida diet. So it doesn't necessarily come with a lot of evidence behind it.
Mm.
But I find that patients do have a good reaction to it sometimes. And then they struggle to continue to maintain that diet long term. So generally, I come in because they've gone on the Candida diet, and then I'm trying to kind of take them off it without increasing their symptoms at the same time.
Right.
Yeah, if that makes sense. So because they're finding it way too restrictive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Penny has asked whether or not you have any general advice in relation to psoriasis and diet connection, obviously. What do we know about psoriasis and the diet? Are things like sugar and alcohol proven triggers? Are there certain foods that help calm it?
I don't actually know a lot in this area, so I'm really
Mm.
sorry. I
That's
actually
okay.
am going to say that I can't answer that question
Mm.
because there's not a lot. I wouldn't see patient generally for psoriasis and trying to reduce those symptoms. Um, I do have a few patients that tell me once they start eating better, then their psoriasis starts to clear up, but I can't say that's a clear correlation. Yeah, sorry, I'm not the best person for that
Well,
one.
it's a really interesting one actually, and we might do a little bit of digging around as well in the drop in and see what information we can find and share with the audience
Mm,
around psoriasis also and any relation between diet. But I think holistically, other things may come into it as well. Stress
yeah.
can be one thing. But so we've heard. So we'll do a bit of digging for you there and let you know, Penny. Okay, so how are we going for time? We've got probably time for one or two more questions. This question pops up in every sort of diet or gut health related event that we run because it's very of the moment.
Yeah.
What are the benefits, if any, in drinking bone broth or collagen?
Oh, okay. So collagen at the moment is coming out, especially in the performance enhancing space. So that would be elite athletes. They're using it quite a lot in that space. I have to admit, I don't prescribe collagen yet. So I've just got to kind of do a bit more research and know what I'm doing around that space. But there is some evidence coming out that collagen does help, but not in particular with gut health. So that would be in particular in muscle health. And then bone broth. I never prescribe bone broth itself, and I suppose that's probably because I don't have a lot of evidence backing up collagen, and then also I have a lot of patients that don't necessarily know the how much of the collagen they're having in that particular bone broth. So I don't eat bone broth myself, and I don't prescribe bone broth for a lot of patients. So I know
Okay.
that's probably I'm a bit too scientific. Sorry.
But if it's delicious and people enjoy it,
Exactly. Go
no
for it.
issue with
Yeah.
enjoying
And
it.
if you want to make it for the soup, just make sure you're having your fruits and vegetables with it at the same time because you can tell them all about the fruits and vegetables.
Fruits and vegetables. And so this question might be a bit cheeky given that we've spoken so much about fruits and vegetable, but it's from our community earlier in the week around fiber supplements.
Yeah.
So the question is, yeah, what's an example of a fiber supplement?
Yeah. So that would be Metamucil or Benifiber or psyllium husk. So
Mhm.
I have patients, I do it when I'm trying to get to see whether I can quickly resolve it, and then gradually we'll take them off the fiber supplement to increase their fiber throughout their diet. Yeah.
Okay, and are psyllium husks as effective as some of those more kind of manufactured, products like Metamucil?
Yeah, so basically one of the main ingredients for Metamucil and Benifiber is psyllium husk.
Right.
So if you're more than happy to go to a health food store and buy psyllium husk over going to the supermarket and buying Metamucil or Benifiber, then more than happy for you to take psyllium husk instead of Metamucil or Benifiber.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, thank you, Sarah. I mean, we've had so many questions come through, and you've really quick fired through so many of them. So, thank you for covering so much ground with us today.
No, you're very welcome.
It's been wonderful to have you. There's so many people that I look forward to sharing this with, and